Okay. Well, this is usually the last lecture of the semester. It's quite an overview, and it takes in consideration. You read the chapters connected to both the continent of Africa and of the pre-Columbian Americas. Considering outside of, at least in Africa, Christian or Islamic centers. African history can be difficult to navigate because you're not really dealing with a lot of text. The same thing with pre-Columbian Mesoamerican societies, unless you get into the very like almost pre-modern Mesoamerica societies like the Aztecs. So um, it's a lot of anthropology, archaeology that go into study these periods. So so one thing is I'm not going to really hold students accountable test wise on a lot of this material. It might be a few questions on the exam, um, but to get started, I would encourage you to check out this video here on the Bantu migrations, which kind of goes back to early African history. The fact that from the eastern side of Africa, you had this group that migrate over for centuries, and that's where you kind of get the common dialect across Africa. Um, and One of the major Christian centers, I'll just highlight this real quick, is in Ethiopia. And You should check out the videos on Lalibela, these old um, Christian churches there that were set up by King Lalibela. And then you have King Mali Mansa Musa. So this is often to the in Western Saharan Africa, where he's considered one of the richest men to have ever lived. These stories of him just basically spraying the wealth everywhere he went when he's on his way to pilgrimage to Mecca. And it's just kind of this infamous story. Not infamous, I should say famous story. Um, so when it comes to thought, you can kind of read through that. Um, and you One of the things I want to highlight is just the amount of um, literacy and trade that was found in Africa. So it kind of goes against, again, it's the one on the one hand, there is a lot of information that's often had to be filled in with the lack of textual data. But on the other hand, because of figures like Ibn Khaldun and Ibn Battuta, we do have these Muslim scholars who well traveled, and they're giving us accounts of things. In fact, Ibn Battuta, there's a map here. He was considered like the most well traveled guy in like history up at this point. He's kind of the Islamic Marco Polo to some extent, and so historians really love his account because he's kind of telling us what thing how from his perspective what's going on in Asia and Europe, Africa, etc., Eastern Europe, so Middle East, and so it's fascinating, fascinating take, especially if you look at the years 14th century. This is on the eve of the European exploration and just the plethora of Western European accounts of what the world is like. It also helps to like um, correct our consciousness, the current consciousness about Africa and its history. The fact that you have these like major civilizations there prior to anything that was really impressive in Europe, right? Europe's on the rise, but I mean, there's these some of these kings and kingdoms in Africa, Christian and Muslim, that are inspiring to actually Europeans, very much like Islamic Spain was. We looked at earlier. All right, so this is the Mesoamerican civilizations and the Andean civilizations. Again, we're gonna quickly go through this, and I would say just real quick, summary, jump ahead to the Aztecs, is that you look at the dates. This is where historians are trying to fill in the data of what these people were like. Um, and again, we're talking mostly around the Mexico, Central American territory, kind of on the border of like um, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Salvador here, and then obviously Mexico here. Um, so, and then we talk about the like the Incas later. We're talking over here. Um, so these kind of groups all kind of highlight a development from the Zapotecs to the Mayans, and the Mayans are kind of seen as like precursors to the Aztecs. So Mayans, they have their own unique creation myth. Um, they are the first. Go back to the Olmecs, the first to use maize. So you think like kind of the origin of corn, which is going to be so important in history, was like flourishing in these areas. Um, Very much like almost like Mesopotamian societies. The priests are major leaders in society, and they're also known for having these bloodletting rituals, which the Aztecs will just kind of like really build up on. Um, Incas in South America, um, now they like the Aztecs are recent phenomenons. This empire rises under Pachacuti in the 15th century, and that's where they make Cusco the capital. Um, and that's when Machu Picchu is being built there. Now, with the Aztecs are kind of latecomers. They actually end up kind of coming in and building up on a group called the Toltecs, and they're the ones that went in around the early 14th century and settled in Tenochtitlan on Lake Texcoco, and they develop a really interesting system there. Um, they are able to survive by creating this Chianampa system of agriculture, which is really fascinating because it really utilizes the water around this territory and have a really like thriving civilization. So it's a very up and coming culture. It's an imperialist culture that is begins really under Izcoatl in 1428, around 1440s. And then under Montezuma, he builds up upon it. They have a tribute system, and this is one reason why many of these surrounding groups do not really like the Aztecs, is because they are in some ways imperialist, kind of bullies, and within their own religion, which is again kind of a development from earlier myths. So they borrowed from other cultures from the area. They are really ramping up the amount of human sacrifice, especially from seizure. So this is going to be a problem as things move forward for the Aztecs and when the Spaniards pop up. Not too long after this system gets going. So, but I think, and again, just to kind of debunk our conception of this area, this is a thriving um, center of commerce, of trade, of culture. Um, Even when you get to these Spaniards, Cortez and others, when they show up and witness Tenochtitlan, they're absolutely blown away at the grandeur of this capital city, and it's considered probably at the time period one of the great empires, one of the great capitals of the entire on the entire globe.